Okay, here we go. Hello, my name is David McCarty. Today I'm going to be discussing COVID-19, collaboration in the digital workplace. So this is going to be a discussion around how the workforce is being modified and has to adapt to the current situation invoked because of COVID-19. Join me as I discuss some of the issues and concerns that people are facing as they adapt. All right, so let's jump right into this. So why is this different than any other large event that's happened in the world and affected our norms? Well, this one's unique, and then the fact that COVID-19 has affected many of us for more than a day or a week or a month. Many of us have been affected for 6 months or longer because of restrictions around travel, working together in the office, team collaboration, person to person. So it is unique. It's different than any other event. And what it's done is started to change how we start to trade information back and forth, how we interact with secure data, how we start to think about securing or protecting sensitive items. So let's dig into this a little bit more. This prolonged divergence in how we work together has forever changed how we will continue to work together. And really that is, COVID-19 has forced many of us out of the soul-crushing commute that we love so much. Some of us even miss our supervisors or coworkers hanging over our shoulder. But today, working remotely is the new norm and likely to continue. There's a lot of things going on in the digital workplace, and as we start to evolve and think about how we're going to adapt to those, the goal is really to eliminate barriers so that we can work together, have a physical workplace, accompanying technologies, and realize greater overall productivity. But really the bottom line is, normal has changed to what we do now. So clearly define your digital skills, your digital awareness, your digital access, and empower the workforce to communicate. Yeah, the truth is, working from home is no longer a luxury. It is now a necessity. One of the senior directors at Gartner has stated recently the biggest challenge stems from the lack of technology infrastructure and lack of comfort with new ways of working. We all have to adapt. 74% of CFOs say they expect to move previously on-site employees remote post-COVID-19. That's a big number. If you think about all of the corporations out there, the government agencies, all the people you work with today, how they're working today, it sounds a lot like people are already scheduling to work that way in the future. Once this COVID-19 has passed us, we will still continue to work the way we're working today. So another Gartner survey found that 71% of CXOs say business continuity and productivity are the biggest risks from COVID-19. So the top two make a lot of sense. Obviously, employee health and safety is number one, 69%. 45% of the CXOs are concerned about financial risk. These are the agencies that you work in today, the corporations that supply the goods that you're using today. So there's a severe financial risk in jeopardy because of COVID-19. But the bottom three are really where I want to focus this conversation today. Information security at 40%, fraud risk at 27%, and IT risk at 27%. So you can see the CXOs have a true concern for the outcome based on COVID-19. So realistically, how much thought have you put into your organization post-COVID-19? 74% of companies plan to permanently shift to more remote work after COVID-19 has passed us. So realistically, these numbers are pretty small compared to what we really predict. So this is from April, a Gartner source, but you can see that it's a staggering amount of people will continue to work from home. You need to plan for your employees to continue to work in the same manner they're working today, but now you need to put a keen interest on securing and safeguarding the digital assets that they're going to be moving back and forth. So now we have identified that post-COVID-19, we're going to have a large amount of our employees or contractors working remotely. So I would encourage you to go look at some of the articles I'm going to point out here. Specifically, Deloitte has a great article that came out in June. The link is at the bottom here. You'll see the link and you can follow that. But the reality is they've identified 10 things that were normal that will have to be adapted to the new normal. The first one is line of sight supervision is essential. Telecommuting becomes the norm. In-office work and meetings the exception. Also, number 4, intelligence employees must work in a secured facility. Makes a lot of sense, but in this epidemic, that's not a reality. So the new norm, back office, and even some intelligence work is performed remotely. Securing data, securing digital assets is very critical to these personnel. Number 5, a personalized customer experience requires human touch. Digital technologies provide a more accessible and personalized touch. As we start to use streaming technologies and we start to transfer files back and forth through mediums, through VPNs, through cloud technologies, whatever we do is becoming more and more adaptive to how we do our work and our workflow. So we must take into consideration how to secure those. Number 7 is also very important in this discussion. A physical presence is needed to authenticate identity. Now, a digital ID is the new passport. Many countries, many organizations have adopted this as a standard. Number 9, regulation is lengthy, inflexible process. Regulation now is agile and adaptive. So we're going to start to see things move a lot quicker because they're not slowed down by paperwork. It is digitally transcribed, it's marked, it's got metadata on it, and we can see when it was created, modified, edited, and we can also track it through the system. So we should see a faster return on value when we start to process our paperwork and our requests throughout the organization. So realistically, what are we looking for? As we start to dig into some of these details, all these large corporations and consulting firms are putting together for us. So let's break this down. Let's make it easier to consume. Let's get away from the consulting buzz and terminology. Let's talk about things that IT professionals hear all the time, and now we need to focus on because we really are in a different world. Security, visibility, control issues. So data security and governance issues, as we like to break them down in Hitachi, are focused around ransomware, lack of visibility over data flowing in and out of the organization, expensive, time-consuming e-discovery for data spillage or FOIA requests, compliance and privacy violations. This is October, and in my company, this is compliance month. So we're going through a lot of training. It's interesting that the training has been modified, and we're starting to see a lot more of the work from home compliance built into the training, which is good, but I can tell you this is going to be something that's going to be in the future and continue as we start to address workflows from home. Risk of exposing intellectual property. We are pushing data in and out of the data center outside of the controlled assets of a secure network across government or contractor laptops. So obviously the risk of exposure is much more prevalent than it's ever been. Insufficient controls over data access. So multi-factor authentication, CAT cards, stronger password. There's a lot of things there that need to be enhanced more than they've ever needed to be enhanced because, you know, little Jimmy is playing Call of Duty on the same network that mom or dad is trying to push their government data files across. That's a concern. Also, limited auditing capabilities. It's hard, it's almost impossible to be able to track and control digital assets once they leave the data center. Once they're outside of your controlled, secure network, it becomes much harder to audit those devices and those data files. So be aware of these things as you start to build on what you've already started to deploy within your digital infrastructure. So I do also want to point you to a KPMG article. I mentioned the Deloitte KPMG is another large consulting firm. They wrote an article called Scaling Security for Remote Working. And you can see the link at the very top. But there's some interesting insights here around shadow IT infrastructure. You know, the tools and assets people are using in the organization because they don't actually have them provided by you or the organization they work for. So they're going to get the job done, and they're going to get it done as efficiently and securely as possible, but that doesn't mean you can control it. So the shadow IT, the only way to stomp that out is to find out what they're doing it with, and give them a viable solution that you can manage and control. Access controls are more critical than ever. That's pretty straightforward. Multi-factor authentication has risen to the top of many people's security priority list. Strong password encryption have been a high point for many years. So obviously controls are essential. Keeping your DLP, data loss prevention, so controlling the IP, intellectual property, and legal protection around the data sets that you are responsible for is also a priority. Keep your employees informed about threats. Like I said, this is October for Hitachi. I'm sure many organizations have a month designated once a year that they do compliance training. Tap into those. Make sure that you are covering the work from home experience. Put your security operations on guard. Deal with wear and tear. Monitor employees' cyber hygiene. So this one's very interesting. Line managers need to keep in touch with their teams to build team spirit and watch out for employees who may be feeling isolated or may be acting in ways that raise concern. So the mental state of somebody that you have given secure data or assets to could be compromised because they're not seeing you day to day. That line of sight that was mentioned in Deloitte's article. Sanity check your privileged users. Don't just assume that the lists are right, the user lists are correct. Go out there and make sure that you have the right people with the right access to the right data. It's pretty straightforward. Look after your joiners, movers, levers, controls. All these things make a lot of sense. Read this article. I think you'll get some good insight. KPMG has done a great job of simplifying some of the things that we should all be doing. You can see from this slide that current sharing techniques increase inefficiency and cost. They're over-provisioned, under-provisioned, they're complex, inefficient, CapEx heavy, and honestly, now you add the mobile workforce and the telecommuters and the forced environment that we're in today, you can see how really cumbersome this environment has become. You have backup concerns, you have branch office, you have public cloud entities, a lot of technologies out there, and now add into that your remote workers. All of these endpoints that are sitting in somebody's home. Their house is a network unto itself. It should be considered a branch office in reality. So how much control do you have over that? How much data protection is provided within that single entity? And as the data comes in and out of your organization through the network in a secure or unsecure manner, it's still being transcribed, edited, managed on the endpoint by those remote workers. Be aware of that as you start to recondition your environment and possibly start to look at changing the environment to look more like as you start to transform your environment, make it look more simplified and gain some efficiencies. So these cloud technologies, the hybrid cloud approach is very, very popular. It gives you a lot more access. The bring your own device, the file sync and share capabilities. These are all things you need to embrace outside of the shadow IT components. If you control the assets, if you control the data flow, if you control the tools that your work from home employees are using, those endpoints really are remote NASs and remote mobile apps. And actually, some of them even have home cloud technology. So you've tapped into a true hybrid world. Make sure you have your hands all the way around this and the assets that are under your control. Otherwise, you will be the next person on the front page. So what are some of the things you can be doing to transform to a digital workplace? So obviously Hitachi has some ideas, our other vendor competitors have ideas, but in reality you need a cloud file services and data mobilization strategy. You need real-time data protection and governance. You need file sync and share collaboration. You need to take your environment today and push it towards this digital transformation and make it a digital workplace so that as your employees continue to work from home and evolve and start to get better at the securing of their data and their assets from home, you can support that from the data center and from the central locations that are essential to the safeguarding of that data set. And then also, we need to be able to move this slide over here. And then also increase productivity from the data center to the edge. The edge is that home office, that remote office that you probably don't have as much control over as you thought you did. And so modernize your file services. Really look at what is being put in place to guarantee the data integrity, guarantee the data sanity, and to be able to deliver the essential assets to your remote workers, to your consultants, to your employees, to all the people that you trust with the information sensitive and classified that's going in and out of your organization. Again, really focus on building a digital workplace powered by modern file services. It doesn't have to be Hitachi, but it has to be something that you can trust, something that can give you the security and data protection that your employees require, your organizations require, and gives you confidence that it will be there and secure when you need it. Make it more efficient, up to 75% reduction in primary capacity if you do this correctly. Self-protecting, cost-effective, non-disruptive, future-ready, integrated intelligence. All these things are capable from more than one vendor. But make sure that you're getting technology and solutions into your organization to support your work-from-home workforce so that they can continue to give you the security and data protection at the edge, at the endpoint, regardless of the assets that they have been provided with. So let's break this down a little bit. COVID-19 remote working. What are the data security checklists that you should be following? There's a lot of information that's being thrown at you, a lot of details about what you should consider, but let's just kind of go through some very bulleted items here. So as many organizations adjust their business operations as a result of COVID-19, network and security are in the spotlight. The significant increase in remote working brings unique challenges, and organizations must remain mindful of their legal obligations to keep personal data secure, right? It's very important that the general obligation upon data controllers and processors to ensure the security of data against accidental and unlawful loss, damage, destruction, alteration, or disclosure is enforced. Controllers and processors must have in place appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure a level of security for personal data that is commensurate to the risk associated with the data processing. This is not a static analysis, but something to be kept under review as circumstances change. The mass shift to remote working has inevitably changed the risk profile of certain data processing activities. Set out in these next couple of slides is a summary of the important considerations from a data security standpoint. All right, so take these into consideration. Let me move this one over here. So business as usual, really, the security compliance must-haves. What must you really have? Number one, system security updates. Remote working should not mean that business as usual procedures are forgotten. Organizations should ensure that employees have updated their machines with appropriate antivirus software and firewalls, and that the latest security patches are downloaded as soon as they are made available. Network limitations. Ensure that appropriate limitations are in place across your network, including limitations on internet access through blocking non-essential services that invite security vulnerabilities. An example of that is file sharing websites that are not part of your organization. File sync and share enterprise capabilities that are outside of your organization, that dark net, that shadow IT. The third one, IT expertise. Managing risk, detecting and mitigating security issues, Training staff and responding to questions and challenges will largely fall on an organization's IT team. Organizations should ensure that they have appropriate expertise within their business and that IT security experts have the necessary resources available to respond to these new challenges. And vetting the vendors. I'm a vendor, you should vet me. Make sure that you know exactly what you're getting into. Due diligence of service providers, including data processors, is a must. Organizations should ensure that all third-party providers have been vetted against internal security standards. Robust contractual agreements are in place in compliance, and internal record keeping memorializes that such due diligence was undertaken. So now let's talk about mass remote working, addressing the new challenges. The Data Processing Impact Assessment, the DPIA. Let me change this screen real quick. So remote working may move data processing into the high-risk category, giving rise to DPIA requirements under different security guidelines. Whether or not the legal threshold is met, DPIAs can be a helpful way to identify and mitigate risks and ensure that security procedures remain effective in the remote working context. The DPIA process can also help organizations to meet security accountability requirements. Organizations processing any kind of health data or personal data as a result of COVID-19 pandemic should also consider carrying out a DPIA. Update remote working policies. It may also be the right time for organizations to revisit their remote working policies, which were probably not designed with prolonged mass remote working in mind. New rules for employees should be considered included the expected standard of security for their home workstations, information and data confidentiality, hard copy and electronic file destruction, and appropriate device usage. Employees must clearly understand the consequences of data incident and should be informed of when, where, and how they must report any such incident. For example, data breach or data loss. Employees should also be alerted to their employer's rights and duties in relation to monitoring of employees' compliance with policies and security requirements, including the employer's ability to remotely access and delete data. For example, there's a lot of reasons that you gave them a government laptop or government asset, and that means you have access to go into that and delete and monitor what they're doing. Number 3, mitigating remote login vulnerabilities. Use a VPN. Pretty straightforward. A virtual private network enables users to securely log in to an organization's private internal systems remotely. Data sent through VPN is encrypted and unreadable if intercepted by an unauthorized third party. Use two-factor authentication. Passwords alone are easy to hack. To access the VPN, employees should be required to use a two-factor authentication process. Force password changes regularly. Employees should be required to use complex, unique passwords, not common words, dates, or identifying information. Regularly require employees to change their passwords to reduce the likelihood of them being guessed by a hacker. Number 4, phishing training. Can your employees spot a phishing email and report it quickly? Employees will be receiving a high volume of email traffic at this time, and bad actors may be looking for opportunities to take advantage of unsuspecting employees. Training on how to spot scam emails should be prioritized. Consider creating procedures for employees with access to payroll, accounting, and other critical systems to confirm instructions and requests have been properly authorized. Number 5, document management and file transfers. New working from home policies should include rules of the road for saving, deleting, and transferring electronic files. Employees should be instructed not to save any work-related documents locally if they are operating on a shared machine, and to ensure through deletion of files on shared machine, including deleting documents from the downloads folder and from the device's recycle bin. Employees should be given instructions on how to use secure file transfer, FTP, transport layer security, TLS protocols, when sharing sensitive data online. Any unauthorized interception of files sent through a correctly functioning TLS system will render the contents of the file unreadable. Number 6, remote access and erasure. Erasure employee devices are appropriately linked to the organization's network so that where necessary, for example, in the event of discovery that an employee's device is compromised or where an employee is incapacitated, the hard drive can be wiped remotely or data can be accessed to allow an employee's function to be carried out by a third party. And then the last one, video and teleconferencing. We're all living in that today. Ensure that video and teleconferencing services are secure. Popular communication apps may be vulnerable to digital eavesdropping. Employees should be required to use only pre-approved service providers. Organizations may want to consult, a data protection supervisory authority comparison of video conferencing tools. As mentioned, the due diligence should be undertaken when selecting vendors for a DPIA, in some cases. In this last section, bring your own device, BYOD. Hitachi has a great opportunity here to help you. Obviously other vendors as well. So I'm going to give you all the ins and outs here. Let me move this over. So BYOD, pros and cons. All right. Allowing employees to use their own device is a helpful and efficient remote working solution. However, organizations are likely to be considered responsible for personal data processing undertaken by an employee in the course of their employment. Allowing an employee to use their own device for this purpose, therefore, enhances the data processing risk, and organizations must ensure that such personal devices and the means through which they are accessing the network are secure. With the BYOD, the employer data controller has less control and therefore must take steps to mitigate the blurring of personal and business use of data, data leakage, departing employees, and loss theft of devices. BYOD policy. What should you do around allowing the policies for BYOD? Employees' use of personal equipment should be subject to the prior approval of the network administrator, as well as BYOD and acceptable use policies, which should be a robust as policy imposed on the use of corporate devices. Provide for strict password authentication requirements. The golden rule, pretty straightforward. Use a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols. Change your password every 28 days. Ignore automatically generated save your password messages. Two-factor authentication for access to the organization's network. Also, set out appropriate limitations for data processing in the BYOD context. For example, it may not be appropriate to authorize the use of an employee's personal device for the collection and processing of sensitive data such as PII or health information. Include controls on device use by third parties such as family members. Require automatic locking of devices after a period of inactivity. Clearly identify where data should be stored. Can the employee save data to their device, or should it be uploaded to the network with any copies being deleted? Something to consider. Provide clear instructions regarding how the employee should segregate personal content and device usage so that the employers can safely monitor business-related use of the same device. Require the use of apps to ring-fence certain data processing activities, subject to appropriate security features being present. Set out data erasure protocols to avoid the device being sold or transferred to a third party with business information stored on it. Explain that the organization will maintain the ability to remotely access and delete data from the device. For example, to delete data in the event that the employee reports a device lost or stolen, or to access data in the event that an employee is incapacitated and cannot perform their functions. Require that home Wi-Fi passwords should be changed regularly. Require employees to alert the network administrator in the event of any actual or suspected security incident or breach, and set out the procedure for access to the personal device by the organizations to mitigate the impact of such breach. Number 3, securing data transfers. BYOD arrangements will involve the transfer of data between the employee's device and a corporate network. To reduce risk associated with such transfers, consider permitting data transfers only via encrypted channels such as VPNs and via TLS. Prohibit the use of cloud-based data sharing or public backup services, and take appropriate measures to monitor data transfers for the purpose of spotting unauthorized interception of data. And then the last one, monitoring and employee rights. So you do have a legal obligation to allow your employee to have some privacy. As noted above, it may be necessary for security and compliance reasons to monitor data processing activities in connection with BYOD arrangements and remote working arrangements more generally. However, any such monitoring must be carefully balanced with employees' rights and must take into consideration relevant national restrictions. Monitoring must be proportionate and focus on specific legitimate purposes, such as network and data security or compliance with internal policies for the security of corporate assets. Where employees are using their own device, monitoring parameters must carefully take into account employees' personal use of the device. Employees should be carefully informed about monitoring, as well as the ability of the organization to wipe data remotely and limit device and app access remotely. Equally, organizations may want to audit device usage to check what business data has been accessed and stored by the employees, ensure that security measures are still in place and functioning correctly, and monitor employees' compliance with internal policies. Such audit should be fully explained and undertaken with cooperation of the employee. A lot of information there, a lot of different things to approach as far as a checklist, but make sure that you have a plan. Build your plan, design it to incorporate this work from home phenomena, and then deploy it and execute on it. We all had a vision of what this apocalypse would look like. The pandemic is on us. We must make choices. We must convert what we've thought was normal into the new normal. We must move forward with what we're doing today and adjust. If it's a bathrobe and sweatpants, so be it. My vision was a little different, but we'll get through it. Well, we can continue to talk about security, but the reality is there are people who work for you. There are people who work around you. And this pandemic, security measures are important, but also their health is important. So make sure you reach out to them, get some one-on-one time with them, give them what they need, keep them motivated, keep them in the game so that you don't have to worry about your data breaches or data security with the employees that you trusted that data with. This will end, and when it ends, our normal will be what it is today. We're not going to go back to what we were doing before. Secure networks, secure data centers have to be extended to the endpoint. The new endpoint is your employees or contractors' home. They're not sitting in Starbucks, which we all were concerned about at one time, hotel lobbies and different restaurants. It's sitting at home with little Jimmy playing Call of Duty or some other game on the same network that your employees are transferring sensitive data across. Be cautious of what you're allowing them to do with the assets and tools that you've given them. So as we start to wrap this up, I know I've introduced some different ideas, things you probably were aware of, some things you probably weren't aware of. I would absolutely encourage you to look at the articles by KPMG and Deloitte. Those consulting organizations have put a lot more thought into this than most of us will, and so there are some great ideas there. I would also have you entertain the thought that the bottom line here, normal has been changed to what we do now. So clearly define your digital skills, your digital awareness, your digital access, and empower the workforce to communicate, because this is not going away. The way we work today is the way we will work tomorrow. Thank you for spending some time with me. Again, I'm David McCarty with Hitachi Vantara, and I've been talking about Beyond COVID-19, collaboration in the digital workplace. Have a great day.